Now that the NBA Finals are over, we're officially diving headfirst into slop season with rumors swirling in the NBA world on a daily basis. One of the most prominent names in these recent rumors and reports is Zion Williamson, as there is apparently some disconnect between him and the New Orleans Pelicans right now. There are frustrations from both sides, and because of it, they're apparently exploring their options with him, and because of it, ESPN actually just published an article proposing 5 hypothetical Zion Williamson trade ideas, and here, as we do on the channel, we'll be going through each one, analyzing whether or not the deals make sense for the teams involved, who benefits the most from them, and why or why not they would actually happen. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first proposal in the article sees Zion Williamson and a future protected first-round pick going to the Charlotte Hornets in exchange for the number 2 pick in the draft and Gordon Hayward. To address what even brought about this discussion, the report that dropped stated that the Pelicans are very interested in Scoot Henderson and want to explore ways to get the number 2 pick, so this trade proposal pretty much exactly is what the Pelicans are looking for. They see Scoot Henderson as a future star in the making, and they also probably view him as more reliable than Zion, who has played something around 1/3 of the amount of games the Pelicans have played since he's been drafted. If the Hornets wanted to take a swing on Zion, then this deal will happen, but the Hornets are going to be the ones that determine whether this comes into fruition or not. Zion Williamson, admittedly, is a damn good fit alongside LaMelo Ball, as the Hornets are trying to find him a co-star to build around. The Hornets, and LaMelo in particular, like to play up-tempo and push the pace, get out in transition, run as much as possible, and run some pick and roll. I just don't know if the Hornets will think the risk that comes with it is worth it. With the number 2 pick in this year's draft, they have the ability to draft someone who could potentially be just as good or better without the injury risk, but simultaneously, Henderson isn't as good of a fit alongside LaMelo Ball, which makes this such an interesting conundrum. I personally don't think the Hornets will end up doing this deal, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do at the same time. The next proposal from the article has Zion going to the Trailblazers in a 3-team deal where the Pelicans get the number 3 pick, Patty Mills, Royce O'Neal, and Dorian Finney-Smith, and the Nets get Anthony Simons and Keon Johnson. This is actually a pretty intriguing deal because in it, the Pelicans have the ability of getting the best of both worlds, potentially. Their interest lies in Scoot Henderson. That much has been made pretty clear. The Hornets have also reportedly not committed to taking Henderson with the 2nd overall pick, as they are also considering Brandon Miller with their choice. This is the kind of deal that would have a much better chance of going down right on draft night, specifically immediately after the 2nd pick gets made. If the Hornets do take Brandon Miller, then the Pelicans will immediately hop on the phone trying to get this deal done, but if Henderson is taken by the Hornets, then this trade might as well be dead in the water. It would give the Pelicans Henderson and some legitimately reliable role players to round out their rotation, giving them some much needed defensive help by way of Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal. The Pelicans have done well to build a defensive identity that had them finish as the 6th ranked defense this past season, and Finney-Smith and O'Neal replacing Zion makes them even better on that end. The Nets also get back a sharpshooting volume 3-point shooter and 20+ point scorer in Anthony Simons, which is good, but another thing that holds this trade back from happening is the fact that the Nets don't get much else and no draft compensation on top of it. They refused trade offers that included multiple first-round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith previously, so I'm not sure if Simons and an unproven youngster alone is enough to sway them to cough up Finney-Smith and O'Neal. Overall, this has a better chance of happening if Henderson falls to the 3rd overall pick, but I don't think the Nets would be fully sold on pulling the trigger. The next proposal in the article is another 3-team deal where Zion goes to the Detroit Pistons, the Pelicans get the number 2 pick, Bojan Bogdanovic and Isaiah Stewart, and the Hornets get the 5th pick and the 14th pick in the draft. This trade is really good for two of the teams involved, and not so much for the third. The Pistons are in desperate need of an injection of life into their rebuild, and they were hoping that it would come by way of landing a top pick in this year's draft, but the lottery kind of screwed them over and they fell all the way down to the 5th overall pick. Bojan Bogdanovic is a trade chip that they plan to ship out anyway. Their front court is way too crowded, so Stewart could end up being the odd man out there, and they would gladly use this deal to land someone as talented as Zion Williamson, even with the injury risk that comes with it. The Pelicans also come away from this trade as huge winners, because Bogdanovic is another injection of offense and can shoot the lights out to replace some of Zion's scoring, plus they get desperately needed front court depth with Isaiah Stewart and the ability to draft Scoot Henderson. The issue is that I'm struggling to think of any reason for the Hornets to agree to this. This year's draft has a steep drop-off after the first few guys, in my opinion, so trading back doesn't really seem worth it in this scenario, especially if they're getting involved in a Zion trade and not even being the team that lands him. The next proposal from the article has Zion and Jackson Hayes going to the Atlanta Hawks in exchange for John Collins, Onyeka Okongwu, and 2 first-round picks. This one is really interesting because it's hard to say which team would benefit more, and it's also difficult to point out one of the teams declining it. For the Pelicans, Zion's stock around the league is probably relatively low, yet we still see them getting 2 first-round picks and 2 incredibly productive players. Collins has a similar athletic profile, albeit he's nowhere nearly as dominant of an interior scorer as Zion, and the fewest amount of games that he's played in a season is still more than Zion has played in 3 of his 4 seasons. Okongwu would be the piece that the Pelicans are most excited about though, because he's legitimately on a developmental path showing signs of an elite defender in the making, and that's also why I think it would ultimately be the Hawks that say no to this trade. Zion in Atlanta alongside Trae Young and DeJounte Murray would be electric, and having 2 elite playmakers setting him up would take his game to another level, but I'm not actually sure if this trade makes the Hawks that much better. Plus, again, if Zion gets injured again, then their depth is completely depleted. Okongwu is the piece that makes this trade an overpay, so if they replace him with someone else, then this deal has a better chance of getting done in my opinion. And finally, the last proposal from the article has Zion Williamson, Larry Nance Jr., Trey Murphy, and Garrett Temple going to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for James Harden, PJ Tucker, Mac McClung, and 2 second-round picks. Of all of the trades we've discussed today, this one is by far the craziest. So much is going on in this deal, and it easily has the lowest probability of actually coming about. James Harden's future in Philadelphia is currently up in the air, and he has a big decision to make in free agency, but if he leaves, I don't see why Zion Williamson would be the star that the 76ers pivot to as a potential replacement. The fit alongside Joel Embiid is incredibly wonky, and it kills the team's spacing. The last thing the Sixers need is more injury-prone stars, and while the depth pieces like Larry Nance and Trey Murphy are very good sweeteners, it doesn't change things for me all that much. Not to mention that James Harden has to actually agree to this, as it's a hypothetical sign and trade, and I don't think the Pelicans are a better situation than some of his other options on the open market. The Pelicans are in need of a primary ball handler and playmaker, so I do like Harden's fit there, and I see why they would try to get something like this done, but the Sixers would have to get incredibly desperate to even consider this. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these potential Zion Williamson deals. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.